More bad news for FIFA, more bad news for Gianni Infantino.
July 29th, 2026 was the day football finally turned against FIFA. President Gianni Infantino unveiled what he described as an opportunity to transform football's financial future.
It centres on FIFA's plans to raise billions of pounds by seeking private investments in its competitions via a minority stake in a new commercial property.
A move that FIFA claims could generate an additional $20 billion to help develop football around the world and provide more funding for all 211 member associations. In other words, FIFA was trying to sell parts of the World Cup, but instead of being welcomed as a bold new opportunity, the proposal caused immediate backlash. FIFA needs to be permanently dismantled and Infantino needs to be arrested. UEFA unanimously rejected it, CONCACAF followed soon after, and even senior figures working inside FIFA began publicly speaking out against their own president. FIFA's proposal was designed to help football, but instead it united the world against FIFA. Journalists, pundits, and football fans have had plenty of complaints about Infantino and his actions, but this controversy was different. From Infantino's point of view, the proposal wasn't nearly as outrageous as many of the headlines made it seem. On paper, it sounded like a plan to generate more money for football, and the timing wasn't a coincidence either. FIFA just concluded what it described as its most commercially successful World Cup ever, which is no surprise considering we had 40 extra matches and hydration breaks. Gianni Infantino believed that football had reached a turning point. If there ever was a moment to build on that momentum, this was it.
We believe that the FFE proposal would unlock the sport's potential in every corner of the world across men's, women's, and youth football.
He argues that Europe already has the financial resources that it needs, while much of the rest of the football world does not. Europe already has some of the richest leagues in the world. England, Spain, and Germany don't exactly need FIFA to keep the lights on, but many smaller football associations aren't nearly as fortunate. Think countries like Uzbekistan, DR Congo, or Cape Verde. In Infantino's eyes, football wasn't being sold. It was monetizing its biggest asset, aka the World Cup, more effectively. He argued that FIFA could invest more money into developing nations and continue growing the game across all 211 member associations by generating more revenue. But wait, generate more revenue? Isn't FIFA a non-profit? Technically, yes, the same way that Donald Trump technically won a FIFA Peace Prize. According to FIFA, every dollar it earns is reinvested back into football rather than paid out to shareholders. So from Gianni Infantino's perspective, making more money simply meant helping football even more. And to be fair, he wasn't pitching this as a done deal. He repeatedly described it as a proposal, not an obligation. A democratic process where FIFA's members would ultimately decide whether the idea was worth pursuing. Infantino also rejected the idea that FIFA was selling part of the World Cup itself. Instead, he argued that FIFA would create a new commercial entity capable of attracting outside investments and unlocking value that had previously been left on the table. Calling it, quote, unlocking value certainly sounds a lot better than calling it what it is. But regardless of how Infantino chose to describe it, that was exactly how many people around the football world interpreted the proposal. And they were not convinced by FIFA's explanation. Matter of fact, the football associations couldn't be any less convinced. But why was this proposal so different? After all, FIFA was no stranger to controversies. The 2018 World Cup held in Russia was opposed by Western governments and media. The World Cup in Qatar was opposed by human rights groups, fans, and even some players. Germany is really doing anything but making it to the quarterfinals of a World Cup, and the 2026 World Cup held in the US came with its own set of political issues. But this time, the criticism wasn't coming from outside of football. Instead, UEFA immediately rejected FIFA's proposal. CONCACAF followed shortly after, and while working on this video, AFC and the US Soccer Federation have rejected the proposal as well. Normally, football can't agree on anything: VAR, new tournament formats like the UCL or World Cup expansion, or even who the real GOAT is, which by the way we all know is Anthony. Every argument has people on both sides, but this proposal was different. For once, multiple confederations all opposed FIFA's plans together. And seeing all of these football associations agree with one another is like watching Kevin De Bruyne score a hat-trick. It's incredibly rare, but when it happens, it's beautiful. According to Gianni Infantino, this proposal would strengthen football around the world. Instead, it did something else entirely. It united football against FIFA. The first confederation to publicly draw a line in the sand was UEFA. Now, FIFA and UEFA disagreeing with each other isn't exactly breaking news. The two organizations have been butting heads for years over everything from the international calendar to the expanded Club World Cup. But this time felt different. They responded to FIFA's proposal with an official statement which reads, "The World Cup is not for sale." The sole control and governance of football are not assets to trade. None of us are the owners of football. It is not FIFA's to sell. UEFA didn't just criticize the proposal, but every member of its executive committee unanimously rejected it. They're also discussing the possibility of boycotting the next World Cup entirely if FIFA decided to push ahead anyways. Italy got a head start and already boycotted the last 3 World Cups. Another big issue with the proposal was its lack of transparency.
We found out via a press release about a very important project. We don't have any details about it, and the little that we know raises many questions.
And UEFA was not alone in how they felt. Soon after their statement, CONCACAF released a statement of their own. Representing 41 member associations across North and Central America and the Caribbean, the Confederation made it clear that it was rejecting FIFA's proposal in its current form. The deadline was too rushed, there hadn't been enough consultation, and there wasn't enough transparency. And perhaps most importantly, they questioned why private investors needed to be involved in the World Cup at all. So how did FIFA respond to all of this? Well, to help convince members, FIFA announced that any association approving the proposal before December 15th, 2026 would receive an additional $20 million in development funding. Sure sounds like a bribe to me, but of course FIFA insists that this was simply an incentive to reward early participation. The biggest blow, however, wasn't coming from UEFA or CONCACAF. It was coming from FIFA itself. Kevin Lamour, FIFA's chief operating officer, publicly accused Gianni Infantino of deceiving FIFA's own administration.
That the governing body staff were deceived by Infantino's lack of openness over his plans for the World Cup private investor schemes.
He even admitted that speaking out could cost him his job, and he wasn't the only senior figure willing to take that risk. Carlos Cordero, one of Infantino's own advisors, resigned from FIFA altogether, saying, quote, "I cannot stand by while FIFA considers selling a stake in the World Cup." At this point, it wasn't just another disagreement between FIFA and UEFA. One of FIFA's most senior executives was accusing the organization of deceiving its own staff, while one of Infantino's advisors had decided the proposal was serious enough to resign over. For years, Gianni Infantino had weathered criticism from journalists, politicians, and millions of football fans. This time, however, the loudest criticism wasn't coming from outside FIFA. It was coming from football itself. And perhaps Don Carlo himself summoned up the feeling around football better than anyone else could.
And the World Cup belongs to the fans, to the people, to the peoples of the world. It's a truly beautiful moment, I think. I hope that neither UEFA nor FIFA will ruin this celebration for the whole world.
So, as I was editing the video last night, FIFA decided to scrap the proposal altogether. After days of opposition from UEFA, CONCACAF, the AFC, senior FIFA executives, and even Gianni Infantino's own advisors, the organization decided to not move forward with the sale. FIFA described it as listening to feedback and respecting the consultation process. Others see it as a U-turn from Infantino, a desperate attempt at keeping his position of power. But regardless of how you interpret the decision, one thing was impossible to ignore. For years, Gianni Infantino survived criticism from politicians, journalists, and millions of football fans. Russia, Qatar, the expanded Club World Cup, and most recently, the expanded World Cup itself. Every time, criticism eventually faded, but this time was different. Not because the proposal itself was necessarily the biggest controversy of his presidency, but because the people responsible for running football refused to go along with it. For years, football accepted bigger tournaments, more commercial partners, and an ever-expanding FIFA. But this proposal was the moment many of the people who run football decided they had reached their limit. UEFA, CONCACAF, the AFC, and even FIFA executives and advisors all united against FIFA itself. For perhaps the first time in Gianni Infantino's presidency, football's governing bodies presented a united front. Whether Gianni Infantino remains FIFA president for another year or another decade, July 29th has already earned its place in football history. Not because FIFA tried to sell part of the World Cup, but because it became the day where football stood up against Gianni Infantino. And today, I feel hopeful. Mamma mia!